It's time for the Freedom in 5 Minutes podcast. Powerful and liberating business strategies you can start in 5 minutes or less. Now, here's your host, Dean Soto.
Hey, this is Dean Soto, founder of FreedomIn5Minutes.com and Prosulum.com. And we're here again with another Freedom in 5 Minutes podcast episode. Today's topic is this: building solid CFO systems with Jarrod Souza. That and more coming up. What is up, everyone? We are here with a returning guest. Somebody who I'm so glad that he's actually coming back, because he's really, really good at what he does. But unlike some of his colleagues in the whole CFO world, unlike them, he actually builds a lot of systems, and I really, really want to hear how he does this, how his mind works, and how he even got into this kind of mindset in general. I actually want to know, so we met because I was posting a bunch of systems stuff, and then he started reaching out because he knew the same people that I was posting things on LinkedIn about. And so I really want to hear about that. But hey, welcome, Jarrod Souza, my man. How is everything going?
It's going amazing, man. And I'm so glad that you actually invited me back on your show. So I always enjoy hanging out and chatting with you. So this is great.
Well, you're a rare breed, man. It's funny because most of the time, anyone that's dealing with automation, processing systems, things like that, it's usually a business owner who gets it, which is still pretty rare. A lot of them are, fly by the seat of their pants, and they got to do everything and so on. But the other side is like an operations person who has that idea. And so to have a CFO who is willing to offload all of those quote unquote skills to somebody else, it's a very rare thing, man.
Yeah, I don't.
Trust me, it's rare. I've been out of all the sales calls that I have for Prosulum, it's like pulling teeth with anyone in the financial services arena in any shape or form. So it's like they're always like, well, how do I know they can do these types of transactions, and how do I know they can handle this this and this and that? I'm like, it's not rocket surgery. It's
Yep. Yeah. I would, we're probably getting started, but that comes down to a trust issue, right?
Yeah, for sure. Sure.
So yeah, you just have to learn to let go, to delegate. And so, yeah, that's funny.
Oh yeah. But no, it's cool, man. It's cool. So, before we get into this was a question that I wanted to ask the last time, and I did not get to ask it. Or it's not that I didn't get to ask it. I was like, is it all right if we hear about this story? Because this was a story of life or death. This has nothing to do with systems. It's just a really interesting story. You're one of the only guys who I've ever talked to who literally had almost a near-death experience at a lake that my family goes to, where I'm like, okay, don't do what Jarrod did at Shaver Lake.
Yeah.
So that was like when you were telling me, before you even told me, I'm like, crap, did he jump off a rock? Did he do this? Did he do that? My kids do that. I better.
Yeah.
So you had a pretty interesting experience. What was that over in Shaver Lake?
Yeah. So I actually grew up, just I guess it's southwest of Shaver. It's kind of up in that area, anyways, in Fresno. So we'd go up there quite a bit. And in college, we went up there, and there was 4 or 5 of us, and we were going to camp out. So we found a rope swing. We knew where it was at. We'd been there many times before.
Yeah.
So, you're going off the rope swing. We knew that area. We knew there was no rocks under the water. That's typically, how people get hurt. Or logs or anything. And so I guess in my mind, you don't really think about risk management at that point. In your mind, you're thinking you're going to backflop or belly flop. It's going to sting.
Yeah. You weren't a CFO at that time, right? So.
Yeah. So 3 of us actually ended up on top of this tree where you would grab onto the rope and go out. And so we had the brilliant idea of all 3 of us going at the same time. And so, we timed it all out of who would let go first. And so the first guy, we started swinging out. The first guy dropped off and he hit the rope below us that like you would use to pull the swing back in. And we don't really exactly know what happened, but somehow that rope, it slung shot off him and hit me in the neck. And I fell into the rope and the other guy was still swinging. So he made it tighter. Well, I was just like falling through the air and just smacked the water. Like I was already unconscious. Yeah. The rope had just, I don't know how it happened, but it had knocked me unconscious. And it actually, like if this is on video, but you can't see it, but it had ripped my kind of jawline open here. So it had it didn't wrap around my neck, but just kind of came halfway up and tore my skin. But I was unconscious and sinking in the water. Wow. And so luckily the guy that went out on the rope, he just dropped in the water immediately and started swimming to where I was at.
That's cool.
So he pulled me up. He'd said if I was probably, 12 inches lower, he would not have been able to see me. Cause Shaver Lake.
Oh my gosh.
It's getting dark and
it's extremely dark. Like like if someone falls even a few feet, you're good luck.
Right. Right. Yeah. So he pulled me up. There was a boat watching us. They loaded me on the boat. I kind of came to when I was on the boat and I knew I had a bad injury because my friend was just standing over me, holding my neck, holding my jaw. And so I immediately wiggled my hands and toes and I was like, okay, I'm not paralyzed. And so once I realized that, I'm like, okay, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, they got me back down to the hospital. It ended up, it had chipped part of my teeth. It broke my jaw in 2 places. Man. My throat was swelling up so bad. They thought they were going to have to give me a tracheotomy.
Wow.
So then I was in the hospital for 3 days. Then I had my jaw wired shut for 8 weeks.
Jeez.
And yeah, it was quite the experience, but hey, I made it. So it could have been a lot worse.
Oh, man. As you're saying all this, there's a reason why I'm not in the medical field. Like my legs are queasy right now. When you're yeah, that's crazy, man. I mean, even with that life or death situation though, life resumed as normal. Yeah. Yeah.
So at that time I wasn't married. I'm married to my wife now, but we are just dating, but she still she came over and helped me out, took care of me. And
wow.
Yeah. So that kind of proved a lot back at that time.
That's so cool.
Yeah, she's solid.
Oh,
but yeah, it was, it definitely put a different spin on life, but I still, I think, this about me, I love driving fast cars and just, kind of that adrenaline rush. And so that still hasn't left. But I have 4 kids now, so I do it a little bit more cautiously.
Oh man. So I would ask your kind of life story, but that was in the previous podcast. I'm actually pulling up the episode. Should have had that before.
Well, what was funny too for the people before we got on,
Jarrod, so episode 134. If 134. Just to hear how you went from doing marketing and all this other stuff to CFO. It's a really cool story. It was completely I'm that's not nobody. You think I'm going to go to school for this one thing and that's what you're going to become. And you're completely not what I would have expected.
Yeah. I think that's, in actuality, the role of CFO is kind of changing. It's not this get a job at one of the big 5 accounting agencies, do accounting, get into controllers, CFO. Yeah. I mean, there's just so much more involved with the CFO. You're so in touch with operations, with marketing and all the data that we have access to now, that there's kind of this paradigm shift of, you need this background in I actually don't have a background in accounting. I have a background in finance. But you just get a solid director of finance or a solid controller, right? That takes care of that piece of it. Yep. And so I think kind of going back, my brain doesn't think like a traditional accountant, CFO rise, and but
I think that's why we connect, man, because like I said, it's a very rare thing. Usually from what I've seen, the almost like engineers where they're like hi, okay, the double entries on this one is to
and you're saying that as I'm wearing this headset. So.
Exactly. So we actually, through a series of events, I started posting. I was like, you know what? I was developing a system on LinkedIn to share kind of my worldview out on LinkedIn. And part of the system was this kind of social media calendar that I got of talking about different specific things on different specific days. And as I was sharing some of this stuff, I would get a like from Jarrod Souza, and then I'd get maybe a comment here or there. And then all of a sudden, Jarrod reached out to me when I started sharing some things from Sam Carpenter, who created Work the System. And at that point, I was like, and you knew who that was, and you asked me, essentially like, how does what you're doing relate to Work the System? And I'm like, I like this guy already. Like, so yeah, how did you get into that whole train of thought? Because it's a very, very specific train of thought that a lot of people either get it or they don't get it, which is exactly what he talks about in his book, the aha moment, right? So how did you even get into the idea of process systems, and why did it become so attractive?
Yeah. So what's interesting is my brain doesn't naturally work in processes or systems, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what took me on the journey of I see the value in it. And so, reaching out to you is just trying to learn, like, how do other people approach handling this or creating the actual process? And I think that's, again, why I'm not like a traditional kind of accountant. So I have this, I tend to think of things like linear to a certain degree, but then I have this creativity aspect where it kind of is actually at contradiction with itself and at battle with itself in my own head. But when I'm running forecasts or doing different things, my mind will just start going, and it's almost like you're painting a canvas, right? Like I'm in this flow, I'm seeing what's happening, I'm creating this forecast, and then I'm done. It's answered the question I wanted to answer. And then 3 months later, I have the same question. I'm like, crap, where is that Excel sheet? What did I do? What was happening? Right. And so, when you don't have those process or systems in place, it's such a waste of time.
Totally.
Like, it's such a waste of time, like doing double the amount of work, redoing work, not knowing where things are located. And so I think it just kind of out of frustration, actually, is what started driving me in that direction. And so some of that's like, I don't want to be in the weeds anymore. Like I can get there and create the system, but I don't want to maintain. Like I'm not good at maintaining things.
Yeah.
And so, how do you create that process to pass on to somebody else so that they can maintain what you've created?
Oh, no, I love that, man. Yeah, it's cool because it's from whenever I'm talking with, especially people in your realm, they feel like, well, this is a skill that I've developed over years, years and years, if not decades. There's no way that somebody could just document what I'm telling them and then do it. Like, how did you kind of cross that Rubicon?
Yeah, because I'm terrible at it. I was terrible at the process part, the maintaining part. Yeah. And so, I mean, there's some people, and I don't like doing it. And there's some people that just, it's getting really windy outside. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So just so you know, guys, it's, there is a tornado warning where he's at right now. So if you have to go, just go. We can pause it if need be.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm in just south of Nashville, Tennessee. And so I think we're okay. I think it's just straight line winds. We'll see.
All right.
But yeah, so, and I don't like the maintaining aspect. And so, I'm currently serving as CFO at Michael Hyatt and Company right now, and a lot of the culture that they've baked into this, they use a lot of executive assistants, and there's what Michael always teaches is that there's people, like, you have your desired zone of work, right? So like, this is where you're passionate and you're proficient. And so that's not the same for everybody. So there are people that are passionate and proficient about the systems, the maintenance, the things that are just reoccurring the same day in and day out. Yep. And I'm not. And so sometimes, thank you. Sometimes you think that everybody's like you, and it's not the case. So when you find people that have those gifts and you can actually pass on the process to them, like, they love doing that stuff, right?
Totally.
Like, and so, so that was kind of a pretty big eye opener for me too, is just realizing that just because I don't enjoy doing it, there are people that do.
Yeah, it's true. It's totally true. Like, on the documentation part, and then actually on the actually doing it part. Like, it's funny because even with my guys, like, I'm like, hey, sorry for making you do, sorry for that, you're doing this thing. And, one of my guys they'll usually write back. They're like, no, I actually like it. It's not a big deal. And I'm like, how do you guys like that? Like, how do you guys like documenting stuff? How do you guys like, they'll go through like hundreds of different customer files to do like one little change in something. And I'm like, I'm so sorry, guys. And they're like, no, this is great. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'd kill myself if I had to do that. Like, it is just like pulling teeth. And so, so in the whole CFO realm, in the accounting and all other stuff, there's a lot of that though, right? Like, do you find that some, like, what was kind of the hardest thing for you to start kind of offloading, or at least kind of, because you mentioned even trust issues when it comes to either transit, because numbers are numbers, man. You mess up on numbers, it's going to mess up on everything. Like, how did you get over that hurdle? And like, what are some of the things?
Yeah. So even in terms of finance though, there's so much reconciliation, and it's for that very fact, right? So you can't just trust one set of data. So you have at a minimum of 2 data points that are reconciling each other. And so some of that, when we started offloading, is there's a process of kind of like of checks and balances of checking the work, right? Maybe 2 people are doing it at once just to make sure. I think some of the other trust issue comes into that people are just scared to share financial information.
True.
Right?
I've noticed
it's
that.
It's kind of like asking somebody who they're going to vote for a little bit, right? Like,
true.
That's probably, especially in today's day and age. But yeah, so people kind of hold the financial data like close to their chest, and so you just need to build that trust, whether it's an employee or you farm that out, of that they're kind of keeping this confidential. Yeah. And not stealing your identity, and you put some checks and balances in place to make sure that doesn't happen. And it's easy to do nowadays, but I would say too, as you build the trust with the capability of whoever's doing these processes over and over, is you just start small, right? And you start building on top of that. And it doesn't take long before you realize, like, oh wow, I can be replaced. Like, I'm not the only one that can do this process, right?
Totally.
And it can be humbling too.
Yeah, it's kind of that's where it's it never really bothered me. I shouldn't say that, because there was actually a couple of different things where I'm like, oh, crap, like I thought that was like a skill. But like there was one when Infusionsoft was like the big gorilla in automation, marketing, and everything like that. Now it's kind of changed. I would do these huge campaigns called cash machines that Frank Kern came up with, and it would take me like 8 hours to do one cash machine, but it would make a couple $1,000s a month in selling. It'd be all automated. It'd have like its own like expiring offer and all this other stuff. And so eventually I was like, you know what? I'm just going to do a video, have my guys document it and do it. I don't think they'll be able to do it, but we'll see what happens. And they did it. Like every time we had a new offer, they did it. And I'm like, man, I wasted like 80 hours doing this crap. And I thought it was like, because I was so good at automation, but it was, but I had the, like with the creativity, the innovation portion of it, but the actual doing of it wasn't really a process. And I would imagine there's stuff like that with you as well.
Yeah. And okay. So now we're going to switch roles really quick. So when you're going, when you're doing that,
Jarrod's practicing for his podcast.
Hey man. Yeah. So did you find yourself being able to be more creative, right? Like you're not in the weeds on this, but you see the process coming through and you're like, oh, what if we adjusted this piece of the process? Yes. Or what if I did this?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Did you find that?
Oh, without a doubt, because by nature, it's funny, like by nature, if you're doing the thing, you're naturally going to be in the weeds of it. And so you're going to think that there's really only one way to do something. So as the cash machines were being built, when I actually offloaded it and I was like, oh, cool. You know, we have, at the time it was, you know, with the Online Empire Academy, we were doing stuff for Keyword Inspector, which is a piece of software. And they would have a new tool came out, like Trends tool, or we'd have a new special or whatever that we were giving a discount on. I could have now 3 different sales pages, and I can go into rather than having one thing, because I only had the time to do one on my own, I could now split test and say, okay, which one did better? Okay, we'll keep that in the cash machine. How about if we did it rather than doing this cash machine? Hi. Rather than doing this cash machine in this way, like, and right after this one over here, why don't we, if they have bought this product over here, skip this cash machine over here because they'll be more likely to buy this one over here. You're able to then, even now, with Prosulum, a lot of the stuff that would be considered, like I just had my main guy, my main man in Inglewood. He's actually not in Inglewood. He's in the Philippines. My general manager, I had a prospect say, hey, can we get on a phone call? I have some questions. Before I would be the one doing that. But my general manager, he gets on, he's like, yeah, so yeah, what time works for you? And he gets on the Zoom, talks with the guy, and he just sold. He literally just sold somebody on a VSA.
Yeah.
Stuff that I thought. So then I'm like, okay, well, if I can just, now I'm just going to see if I can get some AI bots to do cold emails, to go to my main man and have him sell instead. I wouldn't think that way if I was constantly on the phone, you know?
Right.
So.
And some of that just happens by accident.
Totally.
Right? Or like, you know, like you wouldn't really give up the reins, but something happens and you do, and you're like, oh, wow, this person is capable. Right?
Totally. Because they know, because when there's a process, when they have processes and the business is functioning that way, a lot of the times they're so comfortable that they're delegating to other people now. Like my VSAs delegate to other VSAs. Now they're like now they're trying to see how are you doing certain things. So now like my main man, he's like, he understands how I sell now because he has the time to do that. And so you're always it always frees up time so that you can innovate and so you can optimize and so on and so forth. So,
right.
Like you with your forecasts and spreadsheets and things like that, I would imagine that you have more ideas now than when you were constantly working on stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you can just, it's kind of like what you said, you can take a step back and look at the bigger picture. Mm-hmm. Right. And I look at what we're doing as a company, what we're focused on, and then start dialing in. What I'll start doing is start dialing in certain key metrics that I want to, hold a standard to, right? Mm-hmm. If we're going to like introduce a new product. So, a lot of people will just be like on gross profit margin, but we're going to introduce contribution margin because we want our selling expenses kind of tied into that. And like, what's our threshold? And, so, you know, if somebody fills out a pro forma, like, is it kind of a green, yellow, red? But we'll still review it. But how does it hold to kind of where we've been trending historically?
Yep.
So yeah, there's just it is. So one thing that we actually do is it's kind of a process of our supply chain that. So I get a report every day that comes to my email, and man, there's so much software out there like Google Data Studio, and it's free, right?
Yeah.
And it's like so powerful, gives you good graphical images.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some shortcomings to it, but
free.
But it gives me a quick snapshot of where like our domestic shipping rates are trending compared to international. If there's a spike, right? So I have all these processes too, like it'll raise a red flag so that you can start researching, or where can you become more efficient, right? If like domestic is going up, that you always ask, so what does that mean or why? And how do we figure that out? Yeah.
Yeah. And how to do, like what to do in that. So, cause sometimes there's even things so for example, I have clients who are in the real estate side of things where their VSAs are looking, because they have processes, are looking at if the certain cap rates for rental properties reach a certain point, the VSAs will then start focusing. They have a process to start focusing on finding properties in those specific areas to take advantage of that. And so it's so now with your shipping rates, it's like, okay, well, there might be a process to, see, like, how should we then maybe contact somebody to do different things or whatever. I'm sure there's like, it now that it's in your face, you can actually deal with it and then even make a process to handle it.
Yeah, for sure. And you start asking the question, like, is this the most efficient way? Are there other companies, right, that if we spread out inventory across the country, would that be cheaper for us, right? And then you can allow your mind to go down that road and start, reaching out to other companies. And but that wouldn't necessarily be able to do that if I was the one that was like running these reports every day and, trying to figure it out.
Exactly, because you're like,
what the
crap,
was.
I got to get this thing done because I need to go do this other thing. So you're just like, whatever, I just need to get it done.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so like, so what, kind of going back to Sam Carpenter's thing, which, by the way, Sam, if you're ever listening, I invited you on my podcast a while back and you denied me. You gotta.
He did say no. Did you talk to him?
I did. I actually talked to him on the phone, and he's like, "Oh yeah. He was thinking about it, and he actually scheduled a time, and then he blew me off."
Really?
Yeah. He said, "Oh, I had something."
Kind of got that. Kind of. No, I don't. You would call it like his apprentice.
Josh
Fonger.
Yeah. No, I want the real guy, man.
Yeah. We all have our thing. Want the real thing.
No, so yeah. So when, like, how did you, like, what was like the thing that like attracted you the most to that way of thinking? Because there's really two books that have affected my way of thinking. One is Work the System. Mm-hmm. The other is Rework by the 37 Signals guys make Base Camp. What about that particular book like kind of made, like, what were you attracted to?
Yeah, I don't know. I actually don't even know how I came into his world. It was a long time ago. But he did have the offer, like you could just download the PDF for free, right?
Yeah, and then share it and get the audio version or whatever.
Yeah. I think you had to tag him on Twitter, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So probably if you go to my Twitter account, you'll see it like way back. I should probably look that up to see how long ago it was that I came into contact with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, like I said, like my brain doesn't naturally work in systems, and so when I started reading it, it's actually it was pretty fascinating for me, just because my brain doesn't work that way. And I love growing personally. And so if I can just figure out like the why behind it, like I don't necessarily need to do it, but if I can figure out like the way of thinking of what's the benefit of setting up processes, That's kind of what I was trying to achieve. Also, there's one guy, I absolutely love him to death. He was our chief supply chain officer at one of the last companies I worked for. His name's Mike Ferris. And his brain, like, just that's how he thinks. And so I was always fascinated when we would have meetings and he starts talking and I'm like, we are like so opposite. And then he would say the same thing. I was like, man, I'm actually like jealous the way your brain works. And he's like, man, you know, we all have our gifts. Like the way that you think is completely different, but like I can't go there the way that, you know. And so, but yeah, I love him to death. So I think it was just kind of a, like, just trying to grow personally as well. And not necessarily, because one of the things that I've learned, like if you're not good at it, you can work to become good at it, but is it worth it?
Yeah,
right? Like,
totally.
Like I don't really love, you know, like so I'll go back to like the whole VSA, like recording a video, SOPs created for you, and then the process can be completed. Like, yeah, that's my jam.
Yeah. Have you ever tried to write out your own processes without doing that?
Oh yeah, so like I even subscribe to like Process Street or Process.st. Yeah, and I maybe like tried one, and then I was like, this just it doesn't work for me.
Oh, that's so funny. I was the same way, man. Like it was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible.
Yeah. So I've been using a VSA, right? And just, I think even for me and my team, just the value of having the SOP created. And here's what, I mean, you can probably go to any like small business finance department. Here's what typically happens is finance is pretty much at capacity because we see everything. We don't want to take on another expense.
Totally.
And even my mindset, I'm like, okay, if I can just make us more efficient, right, then we'll free up time.
Yeah.
And we're actively doing that right now.
Interesting.
But just kind of the ease of mind that like if somebody did leave, we have all of these SOPs created,
like done,
that somebody else can just come step into and and assume that role. Yeah,
that's interesting. I never would have. So you kind of mentioned, and something just clicked in my mind is that with your finance position, like if you increase bottom line, hey, get on. Let's get on. I'm going to interview you.
Yeah, he can't hear you right now.
Oh, Jarrod's son is asking him.
I'll be out
something.
Okay. Yeah,
we're almost done. I promise.
Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of grace nowadays. That people are, like cool with family walking in.
Yeah, no, it's always that way. Like for me, it's like I've always been a fan of Gary Vaynerchuk. He's like, be as authentic as possible. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. And I think you have double the amount of kids I do, right?
Yeah. I stopped losing count at 4. So
yeah.
Like it's, so I think we both have 4 in spirit. But yeah, so, and I'm surprised that my sons are not banging on the door going, yelling and screaming, which is great. But you mentioned, so I never really thought of that. You mentioned that as a finance person or as a team, you guys are always at capacity. Like, and the way that I think of it is also like, if you increase the bottom line, say you go from 20% to 25%, I bet you guys are thinking, yes, we're awesome. This is great. Yes. And let's keep it that way rather than going, okay, how can we utilize that to then hire more people? Because then it would make your bottom line go back down to 20%. You're like, right. We don't want that. We don't want.
Yeah. And typically, as a company grows too, whether that's through additional products, whether that's through revenue generated year over year, right? I mean, finance touches everything, so it just adds more complexity to the department.
You guys are like, no, not another product, no.
Yeah. To everybody out there, we see everything. So
that's interesting, though. Like, I never would have thought of that. That's So, like, basically, with anytime the business expands on the normal basis, like if you don't have systems, if you don't have those types of things where people can take over certain things, it's actually more painful for you guys as the business expands because it's more to keep track of.
Yeah, even like one example is just supply chain. Like if you add one additional product, it's not a complexity of 1 to 1. It doesn't add just another product. There's a complexity of probably 4 to 1. Just, you're looking at cash flow, right? To actually get that inventory here.
Yeah.
You're looking at deposit reconciliation of different sales, a new product that you have that you're, entering into whatever ERP or accounting system that you have in place. Tracking metrics, right? There's new sales metrics that you're tracking to this specific product. And so there's a lot of things that it kind of cascades down. A lot of people don't think about.
Yeah.
And so, so I will say one of the great things. So actually through this whole pandemic, through our small business, we've actually cut our hours back at Michael Hyatt Company. So we're putting everybody on like a 6-hour workday. And so that was actually like in my, I love to work. So it was hard for me to like cut that off. One, and we were kind of at capacity, but Michael's daughter, Megan Hyatt Miller, who's the COO right now, she's been really challenging me to stop at 3.
Wow.
And one, it's leadership, because if I want my team to do that, I have to do it too, right? Like leading by example. But 2, it's kind of like the law of constraints, right? If I know that this is it, right?
I love it.
I have to figure out a way, and it just pushes you to become more creative. I have to figure out a way of how do I make this happen, or what one of the questions that she always asks is what would need to be true in order to make this happen. Yeah. And so it gets you thinking on a whole different level. That can make it come true, if you go through the process.
Well, that's interesting, man. My favorite chapter of my favorite book next to the Bible, Rework, is Embrace Constraints. And I almost have the entire chapter memorized. I probably have heard it like 200 times. And it's exactly that reason is that when you have these constraints, it forces you to be creative. And so it's cool. Like that they're forcing you to find better ways. Yeah. And
it's not always easy.
Yeah, I bet.
But it's definitely, but it pushes you, right?
Yeah.
And so you grow not only professionally, but personally as well. And so, yeah, it's an amazing company. Yeah.
So, as you're talking about, new product means more pain and pain and pain and pain, because you had four different things, and by the second one, I'm like eyes glazed over. I could never ever do what you do. It's just not my thing. I literally like when I hear reconciliation, I think. I'm just like, I'm done.
That's it. I'm out. I will say that, new products should also bring in additional revenue and more profit. Like, it's not all painful.
It's pain. So, but that being said, so on the pure CFO side, what do businesses need to know? Like, I'm a small business. I need to hire a CFO. Whether they're part-time, whether they're full-time, like what makes a good CFO and what makes an amazing CFO that when it relates to systems and so on and so forth?
Oh, that's a good question. So
let's give you your typical CFO and then the super powered CFO.
Yeah. So I think your typical CFO will provide your reporting, your forecasting, kind of what does this mean, where are we going, your cash flow projections, and all of that is needed. I think the next step is becoming almost a partner, almost an advisor within the company, and not just with the CEO, but with the other department heads as well, with your other executives, because like a lot of people see like finance as one pillar, but it's like the cornerstone, right? I mean, it's like if you pull that one out.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. Like, and it's interesting because it kind of goes along with what we talked about before. When I know my numbers, I feel like I can make decisions, like real decisions. When I don't, then it's kind of like, I kind of think what's going on is right, but it's not even close to like when I know my numbers,
Yeah. What's interesting is, and this didn't happen at this company, but even I'd worked with a customer experience manager, and he's like, we're getting all these people that are complaining about this one thing, and then you dig, right? There's this emotional response, and then you dig into the data, and you're like, well, it's 1% of all of our sales, right, for the day, but it's true unless you can like see the data, and so I think that's where kind of the superstar, I would say, or what, I don't know what you would call the superstar CFO, but aligns and becomes a partner with educating, not on financials, but how does the metrics that you're looking at relate to the company financially as well, right? Because at the end of the day, you can have like the why of what you're doing, which is everybody should have, right, in your business. But unless you're profitable, like that why is not going to last too long because you're not going to be in business.
Totally.
So you always have to keep your eye on that piece, the financial health of your company. And so, having a strong CFO that you can align with, that you can trust, that has the company's best interest at heart, that can have hard conversations with you, that just doesn't say yes all the time, right? Like, I mean, I can joke around about that stuff because people know that I'm genuine.
Yeah.
So, but there are times when I have to have hard conversations, but there's a respect level there that people know that it's not just because I'm, being an a-hole or just trying to like cut expenditures. But there's a reason behind it. And so, but I always, like you, I mean, most entrepreneurs have that gut instinct, right?
Yep.
And then when you apply data on top of that, it kind of makes them like superstars as well.
Totally.
In the decision-making realm. So
that's interesting. Yeah. Like it's, that's really interesting. Cause like, I've known people who where they knew that one product was doing really, really, really well. And then they had this other product that they thought was actually doing well, but it was kind of like dragging them down. And it wasn't until they were presented with the numbers showing that product's actually like losing money, or that it's like it's super low margin and not even worth it, where they were able to then cut it out and just focus on what they actually enjoyed. And that's all like the CFO being doing that, And I think a lot of businesses don't realize that because they're not, they're not able to step, especially if they don't have any systems and they're managing all of that stuff. They're not able to step away and step back and see, you can let this thing go and like get back 10 hours a week of your time over here because it's not profitable anyway or whatever.
Right. Right. And I think even, depending when we're looking at small business owners, and when I talk about small business, it can be anywhere from, 500,000 in revenue generated a year to 10 million, upwards of 20 million. But I shouldn't say a lot of times, but most times is people have a bookkeeper in house, right? That's just supplying the data. They're doing the transactions, reconciling the bank accounts. And then the business owner gets a set of financials, right? The P&L, the balance sheet. And they really don't even know what they're looking at.
Totally.
Right. So, so typically most people just kind of avoid it.
Yeah.
And so that's hoping, I'm hoping eventually, like you had said, maybe starting a podcast and video series where I'm just going to provide like kind of a safe space. Cause I feel like business owners, it's like the kid in math class that doesn't want to raise his hand and doesn't want to ask like the stupid question, but I just want to create a safe environment where I'm really breaking things down simply, like what should you be looking at, what key metrics and why. And so, hopefully I'll be starting that pretty soon.
Oh, that's so cool,
I think that's so valuable to business owners. Like I want them to feel comfortable looking at their financials, so that they can make those informed decisions.
That's cool. Yeah, man. So that being said, like, how could people, because I know you're like totally open to people contacting you, getting help, like just opening up conversations, see where they're at and everything like that. Like how could people actually reach out to you and start like that kind of conversation?
Yeah, so they can just go to my name, jarrodsouza.com, which is spelled a little different. So it's Jarrod and then Souza.
Love it.
And so, yeah, I think, Dean, you know this, like, I just love the small business, the entrepreneur. And so, I'm always willing to provide advice and help wherever I can, or at least lead you in the right direction. So,
well,
anybody has questions.
Just so cool. Cause there are like people who talk to you, like they get a picture of how their business is actually doing, and they don't have to sit there and hand jam it and do all the stuff themselves and everything like that. They can act like, because the thing with you, it's not just you're not just like helping them with bookkeeping or anything like that too. It's you're giving them strategy, which is huge. That's like where, like for me, like anytime I can find someone who is more of a strategist or a partner like that, it's night and day difference. Everyone and their mom can go and find, somebody who will just punch numbers for you. That's why they have, H&R Block, and anyone can be an H&R Block certified representative, blah, 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 right? It's really the people who are strategic and who are there to see where you're at now and set up goals and stuff like that for the future. And that's something that you're definitely really, really good at. So it's cool, like having that resource that somebody can just reach out to,
Yeah, because a lot of people, small business owners, like you said, don't even know where they're going, right? Yeah. So it's like getting behind the wheel of a car with a blindfold on.
Totally.
Right? It's kind of a silly story, but literally that's what you're doing if you have no budget or kind of forecast in place.
Yeah.
And that gives you the measuring stick of, are we on track? Are we not? So I have people calling me too, just bouncing ideas like, hey, we just listen, like, should I debt finance to scale my company? Mm-hmm. And it's, then I'll just kind of figure out, like, my question with always people is like, why do you want to get bigger?
Yeah.
Right? It's going to be more headache for you. Like what kind of life do you really want?
Let's see, bigger business or more profit?
Yeah. Right.
And more free
profit,
time.
More time with my family. Yeah. So, those are all questions that you need to ask. Like everybody always assumes you just need to get bigger and grow. And
dude,
it's not always the case.
This is why I love you. For you guys listening, this is why I love Jarrod. This is stuff that like is so counterintuitive, but like deep down, this is why do you start a business in the first place? It's for those things. And that's exactly right. Like imagine if you're talking with Jarrod and he's like, well, if you do these things, now you've freed up $2,000, $5,000 that you can use for marketing. And now all you're doing is adding an advertising budget of $3,000 a month, and you're making more sales rather than taking on five new employees that you have to manage and have a headache with. You're just making more money. That's the type of thing where it's like, you don't have to get bigger. Like what do you have right now to, optimize where you currently are at?
Yeah, that's right. I always like to joke around with people too. Like if I see an expense and I'm like, that could have bought like 100 pieces of this inventory, which you could have then flipped at like 4x. Right? That cost like
you're like, what?
Yeah. You start comparing it to other things they could have used it on, right? The opportunity cost. So.
Oh, see, I love that, man. And that's why I definitely love having you on. So yeah, guys, go check out JarrodSouza.com, man, go reach out to him. He's always available. I mean, you have the CFO of one of the most popular brands out there. Totally willing to give you, to just hop on the phone, hop on a Zoom and chat and see where you're at and help you out. It's pretty amazing. But yeah, man, it's so good having you on and talking this stuff because it's very rare. And just the strategic and systemized thinking is awesome to talk about.
Yeah. Man, I love being on. So anytime you invite me, whenever. So the funny story is, I've tried to schedule this for a long time, but I can be kind of flaky sometimes. But we actually had this scheduled like 4 different times. I think you canceled once. I canceled once, but yeah. But man, I love being on here and just chatting with you and seeing where the conversation goes. It always goes to a fun place.
I love it. I love it,
man. Anytime.
All right, guys. Well, go check out Jarrod. Go to his site, jarrodsouza.com. Reach out to him. and start, open up the conversation and see where your business is at. It's huge. Like it's huge just in that alone, is seeing where you're at right now. And, you get somebody who is an expert in what he's doing. And, I know for 100,000% that you won't regret it. So go check out Jarrod Souza and get in touch with him. And that is it, folks. So this episode of Freedom in 5 Minutes is over, but go and check him out. Go check out prosolim.com and freedomin5minutes.com. And with that being said, I will see you on the next Freedom in 5 Minutes podcast episode.
Thanks for listening to the Freedom in 5 Minutes podcast. Now, head over to www.freedomin5minutes.com and register for our free masterclass and discover how to start systemizing and automating your entire business 5 minutes at a time. We'll see you next time on the Freedom in 5 Minutes podcast.